There was a marvelous, marvelous student of Schenker, and he hated all this contemporary music. Just really loathed it. He thought it was the devil incarnate. But we were very good friends. And one day he confessed to me that he had heard Pierrot Lunaire. And all he could say to himself, God, if he'd love to hear that poetry, and if only that stuff behind her would stop. And I think that's very much the way. I know some people tried this, by the way, at the University of Michigan. There was someone who did this with Pierrot and with students who were brought up almost entirely on rap. And I don't even know what hip-hop is, to be honest with you. I don't. Do you understand hip-hop? But what is all this scratching of records? I don't think it will survive in any form that I would regard as serious music or that I would regard in any public sense. The question is, I have students now who write these very, very, very able pieces and very interesting pieces that don't get performed. They just don't get performed. Who's going to perform them? There's nobody to subsidize these performances. And sometimes they get played around here, sometimes they don't. And I don't know what hope one can have for this kind of situation. So I think probably the music will be changed as a result by the situation. I hate to think what it's going to be changed to. I'm doing a pop tune now. I'm doing something which is such an anachronism for me that it's taking me more time than trying to write a string quartet. Robert White, the tenor whom you undoubtedly know, is doing a concert next month, and he wanted me to write a song for him. And I thought, rather than writing a song, I've written lots of songs, and I wanted to do it for him because I'm very fond of Bobby, because when he was a small child, practically, Gunther Schuller discovered him, and he did one of my most difficult pieces, my tenor and six instrument piece. He was the first person and one of the last persons to do it. So I thought for him, he really owes something. I owe him something for this courageous act. And I'd write a little pop tune, because he'd been recording there in Berlin and so forth, as you probably know. And I've written for him a real 1930s, 40s pop tune. And let me tell you something, I have had a terrible time. It's so artificial now, trying to feel what I'm doing is corny or what I'm doing is too complicated, that I've just simply struggled with it. And I used to knock these things off all the time. My brother won't watch baseball now, it offends him, it's so inept. These people cannot play the game. I mean, when you think, they call this, I won't name names because it'll be considered racist, but the current center fielder of the Yankees is called the second coming of Joe DiMaggio. He's not the second coming of Dom DiMaggio. I mean, this guy, to think of these people, if you had only seen, the playing, I happen to have seen Ty Cobb, but at the end of his career, so that isn't what I'm comparing him with. The Philadelphia Athletics in 29, 30, 31 with Lefty Grove and Mickey Cochran and Jimmy Fox. The incredible abilities of these people. Joe DiMaggio would be running after the ball to field it the moment it left the pitcher's arm.
Well, what's interesting to me is, the whole notion of a microbrewed beer is the beer equivalent, if you would, of specialized music making.
Well, good, okay.
It all comes back to music.
I'll buy that. And it's perfectly true because they're very different. Some of them are done rather crudely, some of them are done very, very well indeed. It's extraordinary. That is one of the great cultural explosions in this country.
Well, it's interesting, though, because
when you had all that terrible beer, all that mass-produced beer, which is undrinkable. When I look for a title, I don't want anything impossible pretentious. I don't want anything stale. I don't want to say duo for violin and piano or something such as that. It just amuses me, to be very honest with you. It's no more profound than that. The truth of the matter is, just today, a young composer came in with his piece. He's a student of mine. He's a new student. He's here for the first year. And he found that when he wrote a new piece and tried to show it to some of his colleagues who have already become friends because they live in the dormitory together, they all said, look, we're not interested in doing this music. We're just not interested. They said that. We're not interested. It's too difficult, but we're just not interested in this kind of music. And that is typical because most of these players here are not here to study music. They're here to pursue careers. They're interested in careers in music. I tell them the facts of life, and they can look around and the facts of life confront them every moment of their lives. They know, first of all, most of these people are not going to get academic jobs because they don't have the academic qualifications, because the jobs are so far and few between. They want PhDs, they want things that these people don't have. Many of them go into computers, many of them do commercial work. They still do it already while they're students here. Many of them just drop out. These are associated with every aspect of my life, these songs. And they were associated with my life as you know, as the Brooklyn Dodgers would be for someone from that part of the world. For me, it was the Jackson Senators, a Yankee club in Jackson. No, I mean, obviously, we were children growing up with this music, and it was the music we knew, the music we played. And I mean, we never had any category mistakes here. I mean, when I went home to practice the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto, I never confused that with Never Swat a Fly. Don't ask me why not. Look, when I turned to the electronic medium, not only was I fascinated by it, I'm going to use that cliche, the challenge, because it was. I had to work for years before I could manage that instrument in any way that I regarded as satisfactory. But the truth is that I did like the notion of, you know, walking into that studio with a piece in my head and walking out with a completely performed work in that little tape under my arm. I love to work in isolation, let me say that. I love to compose in isolation, though I've often composed, as Gunther Schuller has, on subways. I like the idea of being able to stand there and redo and redo and redo. If I had that kind of rehearsal time with an orchestra, then I'd probably feel the same way. I think there's a real practical consideration there, except for some very close friends, I never got the performances I wanted. And that certainly was one of the aspects of it. But I loved working with the synthesizer. I just liked it. You do have to learn to hear it. And you learn it informally as well as formally. I'm not saying you take ear training courses, but when you've grown into the music, after all you have to hear are intervals, the fundamental building blocks of any music. When Stravinsky showed tremendous insight in that respect. When somebody said, "How could you have deserted us? How could you have become such an infidel?" Well, I shouldn't use that word. How could you have done this? How could you have deserted us and become a 12-tone, a serial composer? He said, "But I've always composed with intervals." And that was remarkable because he recognized something that very few people even regarded themselves as being quite friendly to 12-tone music. We're not talking about notes, we're not talking about pitch classes, we're talking mainly about the relationship between the two, that marvelous relation called an interval, which is unique almost entirely to the perception of sound and nothing else. So that he certainly used them in a particularly singular and remarkable way.